Hello, my beautiful friends. This is Gauri Ekadam. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. The guest on my channel today is an exceptional healer and a divine friend. I've had multiple healing sessions with him, which have led to profound and enlightening conversations. Please welcome David Montgomery. Over the last 20 years, working with the language of light, David has refined, surrendered, and developed an authentic, clear, conscious channel to this powerful, multidimensional, universal language. David has worked with thousands of individuals as well as groups performing initiations, ascension, activations, healing, soul retrievals, language of light codes, downloads, and DNA activations. David has traveled extensively around the world, leading groups to sacred sites to awaken and re-energize the planetary grid and activate our Earth's new fifth dimensional template. David offers individual and group activations, healing, and initiations. It is truly an honor to welcome David Montgomery on today's episode. Hi, David.
Hello, Glory. How are you? Thank you for that introduction.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming on the channel. It's really an honor and an absolute pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you. And back at you, Glory. Thank you for the invitation to be on your new channel. This is very exciting.
Thank you. I mean, when I was creating the list of people that I want to talk to and all the healers that have genuinely influenced my life or helped me heal in one or a couple of areas in my life, you were literally on the top of that list. You and Natasha and Colleen were literally on the top of the list. And I was like, I need to get them on this channel immediately because the work that you've done, not only on me, but the people around me, my friends, it's really profound and it's really made a huge difference in my life and the lives of my friends and everyone. So thank you.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
So getting on with the interview and moving on to the questions, were you always inclined towards the spiritual path since you were a child?
I think I was, and I can only say that now looking back. At the time as a child, it just felt normal. It just felt like I was naturally tapped in, if you want to call it that, extremely intuitive, a lot of precognitive abilities whereby I knew what was going to happen next. And I would play with this as a small child. I would walk to the end of the block in the city that I lived in. It was a fairly busy street, and I would tune in and I would not guess, but I would picture the color of the car that was coming next. After a couple of tries, I got very accurate, knowing not only the color of the vehicle, but what kind of vehicle it was. So yeah, I grew up kind of in this aura of natural spirituality. And again, I can say that now looking back, but at the time it just felt very natural.
I was reading about your experience that took place in 1999, which made this shift, this complete shift in your life. Can you tell us a little bit more about that experience?
So moving forward from childhood, I kind of carried that forward, studied a lot of meditation, and started to, I guess, learn how to channel. I taught myself how to channel, which also was a very kind of a natural, I think we all have that as children. You know, we're just naturally are tapped in, not only with ourselves, but our guides, those that are around us. And so I took that forward. But in 1998, I had just moved to Calgary. I had met a friend, introduced to a new friend that was here that was putting on a spiritual weekend. And there was a number of guests that were invited that were coming from all over the world. And one of the guests in the little dossier that they had printed out for the events of the weekend said that he speaks light language. To that point, I hadn't heard of those two words put together. I didn't know what that was, but I was highly intrigued. And I knew that I had to go simply just to know and to learn what this was, because something was ringing in me about it. And in that weekend, this gentleman, he was an older gentleman from Oregon in the United States. He was the very last presenter of the weekend. Instead of taking the stage like all of the other presenters of the weekend, he just stood in the corner of this big room that we were all seated in. And we all kind of lined up, and he spent about 30 seconds with each of us as he spoke this language of light to each one of us. And when he spoke with me, it was like a light bulb clicked on. I felt it through my entire body. It was literally like a switch flicked on. When he finished, I impulsively responded back to him in this language, and I had no idea what I was saying to him. But I spent the next couple of hours I had to sit down because I was vibrating so high, and I knew that something big had just taken place. Fast forward a couple of weeks or a month, I thought, okay, I found out what that was. That was really powerful. It was really a neat experience. At that point, I hadn't really thought about, digging any deeper into what it was until I started hearing it. And it started showing up where I would like audibly hear it, like somebody was speaking it to me in my mind. And it would show up in various times. It would sometimes in meditation, sometimes in the shower. I would just start hearing this language that I recognized as the light language that Boyd was speaking. From there, I thought, okay, this is interesting. I haven't heard this before. So what I started doing was reciting what I was hearing. So for the first part, there was this recital happening where I would hear these phrases. And again, this is not in any language we know. This is not in English. It's not in Hindi. It's not anything anybody's ever heard. So it was very bizarre. And there was a period of kind of getting over myself, thinking this is rubbish. What am I, this doesn't mean anything. So getting past the brain and the mind that wanted to judge it, I started playing around with it, and I would recite what I would hear. And after I recited it, it's like another phrase would come in, and then I would recite that. And as soon as I would speak what I was hearing in that recital, there would be this wave of energy that would come through my body. It was like I was opening a door each time I spoke what I was hearing. So I played with this for a little while and started getting a little bit more comfortable. Also, my background in my channeling really provided a kind of a positive and solid base, a grounding for being able to like tap in and receive this light language message that was coming through. So I decided, okay, I'm going to take this a little bit further. And I decided to get a couple of close friends together and said, hey, this is what's going on. I want your feedback. And I say close friends, meaning I was keeping this incredibly secret because I didn't want to, someone to call the loony bin and say, this guy's off his rocker. But as soon as somebody was in front of me, something changed quite dramatically. It was no longer this recital. It was a focus of this message for the person that was with me. Out came this stream of this language for this person that, again, I had no idea what the meaning was, what the context is. I just know that it was a very powerful outflowing of divine energy, and it was being directed towards this person. So I spent a number of months, I guess, getting comfortable with allowing this to come through in public and with people, and also getting their feedback on what was happening on their end. And that's another whole other story, what people started going through when light language was brought through for them.
So how did people react when light language was brought to them?
It was pretty profound. Well, there's nobody that has not ever said that, they didn't feel anything. Most of the time, it's quite a profound energetic impact. And a lot of people were brought to tears. Yeah, you were one. Yeah, I remember. But what was interesting is following up with them in the weeks and months afterwards. I can't take credit or attribute all of the shifts and changes that happened to, just the messages that were coming through. But people would be reporting back saying, I've been dealing with such and such, for so long. I've never been able to break through this habit or this whatever it is. And they would say, a day after your session, it's gone. Like it's not there anymore. I don't have this, or this things I've been dealing with for so long is just lifted. It's, I'm now on the other side of it. That was very helpful for me because I was, this was completely brand new. And this was before anything was on the internet about the language of light, because I tried, I looked. So I was left to my own devices. I was left to, in the kind of the grassroots, to learn about it myself, from the energy from the language itself and from working with people. So yeah, there's a lot of energetic impacts. How is it with you, Corey? Do you remember?
I remember it was the ancestral healing session that I did for the first time with, and that's where I met you and Natasha for the first time. And Colleen had referred,
Okay.
we have this group at the end of the week. If you're interested, would you like to be a part of it? And I was like, I'm in, because my session with Colleen was so profound. So I completely trusted her in that moment. And I'm so happy I did,
Yeah.
because after that session with Colleen, which allowed me to release a lot that I was holding on to, I then came on to your session with you and Natasha. And when you spoke the language of light, there was a part of me which wanted to respond, like to talk back to you. Because I remember
Hmm.
I've said that to you even after the third session that we did, which was again the group
Yeah.
session. But I wasn't able to like put it into words, the words of the language of light. So I was just like,
Yeah.
I know what he's saying. Like my heart, my soul knew what you were talking or what you were saying,
Yeah.
what you were trying to do with me in that session. And I, after the session, remember that I felt so much more lighter, and I had a lot more clarity as to
Hmm.
which direction I'm heading in. Because before
Yeah.
that, I was just like, okay, I'm just trying this. It's a new healing modality. I have no idea. Both the language of light and the Akashic records were, introduced to me in that very session. So I had no idea,
Yeah.
no clue as to what both the healing modalities were. But I just remember that in that moment when you spoke the language of light and Natasha was behind me and working with the records, I just knew that something has shifted and it's not going to be the same moving forward. Like there has been.
Yeah.
And after the session, I remember I was like, I need to meet them again.
Yeah. Yeah. Your description is very similar. I've heard that a lot from people. It does have a very profound impact on, I often describe, because I get asked all the time, what does it do? To be honest, there isn't really a limit, because it's, first of all, we all on a soul level know the language of light. And that's why you recognize that some part of you knew this language. And we all, an inner level, we do know this language. It's the language of the soul. One of the things that it helps do when it comes through is, I kind of use the analogy of a lens, a camera lens, is that it helps to refocus and bring into clarity who you are and why you've chosen to be here and what your purpose is.
How did the language of light help you heal?
Well, it's helped me in a lot of ways. I think the biggest way that it helped me was as it comes through, first of all, the language, this isn't like a 26 letter language. This is a universal, multidimensional language. It's an energetic language. The brain will try as hard as it can to try to decipher and make some kind of meaning of it, which it can't. It's not meant for the brain. It's not meant for the logical part of who we are. It's meant for the soul. It's meant for the essence and the spirit and the heart. I had to go through a lot of letting go and trust the process. And there was a period after a couple of years of working with people in the language, I gave it up for a little while. I went through a period where I was like going through huge amounts of doubt, and I was questioning, is this even real? I still can't make sense of it. I don't know what's being said. People must think I'm just talking gibberish. I didn't have any validity to anything that I was doing with the language of light. And I was being challenged at an egoic level because I was really being forced to surrender and to trust and to let go. And so I went through a period of where I just said, okay, maybe this isn't for me. And I just kind of shoved it aside for a little while. And it kind of became the elephant in the room. It didn't go away. It was there. I could still feel it. It waited for me. It waited for me to go through what I needed to go through and then go, okay, I'm ready now. I was given a choice. It was always a choice. So I wasn't forced into this. It was presented, and it's always been a choice whether or not I wanted to participate with this type of energy. I think that in itself has been huge. Just going through that whole process of trust, because as you start, there's one thing speaking it, to yourself in your bedroom or to a couple of friends, but when you're getting invited to present at weekend events where there's a few hundred people or online events, you're asked to describe what it is and to do these group energy activations and one-on-one activations. You're thrown into an entirely different level of surrender and trust. It was really interesting because up until then, I really had just been working with smaller groups. Word started getting out about what I was doing, and people would contact me and say, "Hey, I got a couple of friends. Do you want to come over on the weekend, in my living room and do your thing with the light language with us?" And that happened for a number of years. But it wasn't until I actually went through this whole process of facing my own inner doubts and, the demons associated with really trusting this process and trusting the divinity that was presenting itself. So I had to go through a growth, my own inner work, and do some growth. It's taught me more about myself through this journey than I could ever hope for.
No, I can completely resonate with what you just said, because when I started working with clients, it's a different thing when you're doing just practice sessions. People are not paying you for it. You tell them upfront that, listen, I'm just practicing. I'm not sure what this is. I'm still tapping in. That's a different situation altogether as compared to when you're actually doing the proper session and healing and working with them one-on-one. So I completely agree with you, because I had my set of doubts as well. And there are times when I remember I've had conversations with Natasha. I don't know if I'm doing it right.
Yeah.
You just need to trust and you need to keep going, and you are on the path. And she used to reassure me. But I had a mentor and you did not have it. So I can only imagine what you went through, because I had Natasha, I had Colleen, I had you, but you were in the arena all by yourself. So I can just imagine, literally only sit here and just imagine what you must have gone through.
Yeah. Like I said, this was about the language of light. In fact, all of the research that I did, all I found was, I'll think of the artist's name. He paints the language of light. It comes through him differently than it does me. And he paints the language, writes the language. So he has Brian DeFleurs. Brian DeFleurs has a website with all of his artwork. So he was the only other person that I found. And I found that fascinating, because here was somebody who was tapping into this energy, but it was coming through and expressing through him differently. It wasn't coming through him as it was coming through me as an actual spoken language. It also widened my scope. And it wasn't till after that I actually started allowing myself to start bringing it through differently as well. And I went through a period of a couple of years where I did a lot of painting and a lot of writing, and the language. So instead of coming out as an actual language, it would come through as symbols and these glyphs. So it was almost like this alien kind of language writing that would come through. So to answer your question, I was alone. Pretty much. You're forced to carving your own path. I mean, nowadays, if you go on the YouTube or the internet, there's so much information about light language, and almost all of these people in some ways have probably heard somebody or heard a number of people, and they start copying them, and they kind of fall into their own rhythm. And that's, there's nothing wrong with that. It's perfectly fine. It's a different learning curve. That's all.
What is the language of light, and where does it come from?
It's a part of the fabric of creation. Language is a little bit of a misdemeanor. It's actually a sound source. So you could actually call it a sound source in its original form. It was a part of creation itself that came forth in creation. Over time, it has been developed, or it can be developed, into honing that sound into tones and frequencies and vibrations within an expressible language. So it's using those tones expressed through a particular vibratory language. So it has been around forever. It's been on Earth forever. It's been used on Earth before in ancient days. Through all of the past golden ages, we've tapped into and used light language for many, many different things. It's been used in ancient Egypt as ritual rites and initiation rites. All through these high peak periods of higher levels of consciousness, where we've been able to start bringing that energy down and use it. So it's not something new that's showing up. It's always been here. It's just that we ourselves, as we are raising our level of consciousness, we're opening up these new doors to these levels of information and energy, and learning how to realign with them and bring them through.
And what is the language of light? Like, if someone wants to understand what it is, I've tried to explain it to a couple of my friends, which who I want to like send to you, and they were like, "But what is it?" And I'm like, I'm not really
I
sure
know.
exactly what it
And
is.
yeah, I know. And this, this is the mind wanting to put labels on it and try to understand it. It's very difficult to come through, to bring through a proper description that our brain is going to go, oh, okay, I get it. It's not a language born from Earth. It's a multidimensional language. So what it is again, it's multidimensional, which also means the message that comes through is multidimensional. It's a very high, well, it's called in the inner planes like the mother language. It's the language of which almost all other languages have been derived from. In fact, on Earth, the 7 root languages, Sanskrit, which is one of them, are like derivatives of light language, the language of light. It is a means of communication, of instant communication, where there is no need for translation because it's like an instant communication pathway from soul to soul. It's energetic as well as vocal, but the vocal is like a doorway that allows this energy to move through and with the tonal expression of the language. A lot of people have expressed that after a session, they say, it feels like I just got a message from home, like our real spiritual home, like somebody just spoke to me from home. It is able to convey vast amounts of information very, very quickly because it's a multidimensional language. It doesn't take hours of communication. We are now so long to describe something because the limitations of our language. Light language doesn't require that because again, it's multidimensional and it comes through with so much more frequency and energy. And through that, there's such a high conveyance of information that comes through very, very quickly.
I read something on your website which really took me aback and it really made me think, which I want to also share with the viewers. I'm going to quote you here. The language of light lovingly penetrates all human created energy blocks, encoding higher vibrational information into our energy field that enables us to quickly release old, stuck energy patterns, thoughts, forms, and blockages. So, how does the language of light help us release all of this?
We all are carrying our own blocks, be they mental or energetic, emotional. What I know from working with the language of light now for 22 years is this language doesn't recognize our own created blocks. It doesn't recognize what we have created as limitations or duality. All it recognizes is itself, which is the divinity within. And that's what it speaks to. And in doing so, it's like it imbues you with this resonance and this energy whereby these blocks that we have been carrying automatically kind of they just diffuse on their own. It's like a light source that's pointing to the light source within you. It's like turning the candle on in a dark room. Just the act of having the candle on illuminates the darkness. And that's how the healing is happening, instead of, going after our own created beliefs. So it's really quite interesting how it works in that way.
No, because I remember after our session, I did a session with you and Natasha, just like a one-on-one session with both of you together.
Yeah.
And I had come in with a lot of blocks, a lot of limiting beliefs. And I remember before the session, we had the conversation. I told you, this is my intention. This is what I want to either release or let go or, manifest. And we had that conversation and you're like, okay, let's get into it. And then we just got into it. And I remember after the session, and it was, I think, 2 or 3 hours after we had completed the session, I felt lighter, like physically I felt like there was a load on my shoulder, which was just lifted. And
Yeah.
this was a different feeling as compared to, the other times when I have gone through a meditation, I've done the meditation, I've done like my Reiki, my healing. This
Yeah.
was completely different feeling. When I felt on like a physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual level, I felt lighter.
Yeah.
And that was different. I can put my money to this and say that, what, this does this. It actually helps you release energetic blocks. It helps you release limiting beliefs.
I've heard from so many different people. One of the things that this energy does, as I was saying, we all are in tune on a soul level with this language. And the work, how I have learned how to work with this energy is by working with you, tapping into you in your higher self. First of all, I never have an agenda. Like, I'm not here to do something. I just show up. Those two words, show up. Very early on, when I started working with people, when I was still kind of dealing with my own fright and doubts, I got this message very, very strongly. And it was like, David, you just need to show up. Just show up. Nothing else. Just be present. And that's how I've done thousands and thousands of different sessions. There's no agenda. I just show up. There's a lot of involvement with tapping into what is for your greatest and highest good in this moment. What is going to benefit you, your soul, your life path in the most positive way right now. And I don't always and often don't know what that is. However, what comes through with this energy is exactly what's needed. Always exactly what's needed. I'll share a little story if I can,
Yeah.
because this was a profound moment when I was shown how this energy works and how it is multidimensional, and how the language of light doesn't work on our concept of time at all. I had finished doing a big group session this one evening. And as I often do at the end, if there's time, I'll do a mini one-on-one. So there's something a little more personal for each person. And I've learned how to connect and tap in quickly and just open up and allow what wants to come through. I was connecting with this lady. This lady, was her turn, and she came up and I connected with her. The most amazing thing happened. It had not happened before. And I don't recall that it's happened after, but I think it was almost like I was allowed this window to see what is actually taking place and what can take place. So she was standing in front of me, and as you know, like I hold your hands in a specific way, and it's eye gazing, and I look deep, and I'm not looking at the physical, corporeal. It's like I'm looking at the essence. I connect with the essence. And as I connected with this lady, an entirely different scene opened up in my mind's eye, parallel to what was happening. What opened up was I was standing doing the exact same thing with her in a former life of hers. I can only guess it must have been a few hundred years in the past in Europe, because we were standing in a green field, and behind her was a hut, her home. It was just a very simple kind of mud and straw. And the clothes that she was wearing were soiled, and she had like a scarf or something wrapped around her head. Simultaneously, as she was in front of me in this room, there was this connection happening in this past life. And the message that came through for her was happening parallel. The message that came through afterwards was this soul most needed to receive the message that was coming through for her was actually this past life. That is where she needed this info, not specifically, this moment in this room. She needed to receive it in this past life. And from there, that was going to have its ripple through her lifetimes and also her passing down genetically. So it was a really amazing eye opener as to, oh, that's how it's working. Okay. I was saying it doesn't recognize our own, human created blocks. It doesn't recognize time and needs to go. And it's directed there by us, by you. It's not me doing that. It's like, it's their soul, it's their higher self that is saying, okay, this is what we need to do. This is where we need to go, because that's where this is going to have the biggest impact for this soul's life.
Yeah, that makes sense because even if I think about it, right now we in the 3D world, we both are on a Zoom conversation, but there are other timelines, other dimensions, and other realities, like we talk in the Akashic records, which are parallel and running at the same speed as this moment. So
Yeah, yeah.
it completely resonates. Moving on to the next question, which is another point which I read on the website. The energy of light language recharges the water molecules in our body with geometric information. How does it do that?
As we all know now, memory or water has memory. Water holds specific patterns of energy. Dr. Emoto is the one that proved that by freezing water. Well, first he would place specific intentions on water, and then he would freeze it and then carefully dissect it and look at the geometric patterns that the water molecules held. And he was able to determine that different energetic intentions and vibrations produce different geometric shapes within the water. And our body's no different. We're 66 to 70% water. The language of light and sacred geometry are almost intertwined. It's like if sacred geometry could speak, it would be light language. That would be its mode of communication. So the two are very intertwined. And it makes sense that if this sound source is an aspect of creation itself, sacred geometry was also present. So they're probably on an inner level, one and the same. So yeah, I'm going back to your question, water holding memory. One of the ways that light language impacts us on a physical level is because of its high divine nature in its vibration, it is able to communicate on a physical level as well with our cellular anatomy, with our DNA, and also with water molecules. You know, often the message that comes through is it's not meant for us to understand up here. It's meant for the body to hold. It's like getting a new code, a new frequency installed into our body, a new software installed into our body on an actual physical level. Although the water is one of the ways that our body can hold that energy, those messages, that frequency.
Would you say that every human being has a different sacred geometry within them?
I would say yes, they do. I think at a very base level, it's probably very similar, but just like everybody has their own vibrational signature, there's no two exact fingerprints. They're similar, but if you look at them, they actually are very different. You know, the same on a geometric level within ourselves as well.
I mean, there are so many. Like, I have to, after listening to you, I have to come back to the point where I'm like, oh, wait, we're in an interview because you are just leaving me with complete aha moments. Moving on to the next question. On your website, you've also mentioned and you also talked about a little bit, like you touched base on it a little bit, that there are 7 root languages. Could you please elaborate on that?
Yeah, I talked a little bit about that earlier, how light language has been spoken on Earth before. And our history goes back much, much further than archaeological science will admit, millions of years. There were times when this language was spoken fluently. That is a time when the vibration was much higher. I guess such a more dense 3D matrix as we are now, there is much higher levels of consciousness. And there's memories from that language. The 7 root languages, and I'm not going to remember them all, I'm sorry, Sanskrit, Chinese, Aramaic, I'll think of them in a little bit. But there are 7 root, and these are the oldest languages on Earth. It's almost like the rise and fall of these different golden ages and levels of consciousness as, you know, the ebb and flow has happened through history. We have almost remembered snippets of the language of light and kind of derived our own language around those vague memories. A lot of people say after they hear it, they're like, oh, that sounded, you know, there was a lot of Chinese, or that sounded this, or, you know, it sounded like this language. And it does, not because I'm speaking those languages, it's because we have derived those languages from the language of light. It's actually the opposite. So yeah, the 7 major root languages, of which many other languages have sprung from, are derived originally from the language of light.
On your website, I also read that each developing species in the universe is connected with a specific branch of the light language. So, not just human, but other living beings can also tap into the light language.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah, this is taking the subject expanded a little bit more. So it's not just happening on Earth. This is all through creation. Working with the language of light and meditating with it and on it for so many years, it's like there's insights will start to kind of pop through my consciousness. And that was one of them, whereby there's a divine plan before a species even begins to be seeded and evolve. There was a divine plan for that incarnating species, like a higher ultimate divine plan for that species. And there is almost like not a record within the light language, but it carries the codes, it carries the frequencies that perpetuate and assist and help in allowing that species to follow that path. So it's like when I said it helps refocus the lens and bring into clarity on a much, much grander scale, it does that for an entire species as well. And again, it's not just through one person. We're all tapped into the language. Like I said, it is such a vast, energetic language that it's kind of a shame because no amount of trying to describe it or talk about it does it any justice, if that makes any sense.
Yes, it does.
Us here, the human species, there is an ultimate divine plan that has been at play for a long, long time. The language of light, it's like it's imbued with that divine plan for that species. It could be the other way around. The divine plan was it was imbued with the creation itself, and we are simply just following it out. We have a specific divine plan. Different species on different planets have their own divine plan, their own evolutionary cycles. And they very well may be tapping into, a different branch of this energy that is specific for them, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does. I was just trying to relate it with the Akashic Records because in the Akashic Records, everything has a record. So be it a crystal, be it a planet, be it a possession that you have, a property, human beings, of course, we all have records, even animals, they have records. Help me understand that similarly, the light language works with each and every species, living or non-living, in its own way.
In its own way, exactly. Yeah.
Wow, that's very beautiful.
It's vast. Like when you start expanding and opening up, it's a divine expression. Ultimately, is what light language is. It's a form of divine expression that also brings forth lots of information, and that information is delivered to us and held within the energetic body system, within our subconscious, also within our soul. I've worked with some people, they were not, I guess the timing wasn't right for the message that was coming through. It's not that it was the wrong message, but what I could see happening is the message was being delivered and it was actually being taken up by their guides, their spirit guides. And it was like, we will hold this until this person is ready for this message. Like I said, we're all communicating within the language of light on a soul level because it's an instant form of communication.
What should a person expect or be prepared of when they are coming for a session for the language of light with you?
You don't have to expect anything or even be prepared for anything. Each session is so different and so unique. Like I said, when I work with people, I don't have an agenda. So oftentimes I won't even know really what's going to be happening until we're on a call or we're face to face. That being said, so many different things can happen. Like I said, many people can just start crying and fall into tears because there's such a profound energy that is moving through them and a remembrance of something that the mind can't quite process it, but the body remembers. There's been people that I did this group in a lady's home where as soon as I started speaking the language, she had to run to the bathroom and she vomited like immediately. Just there was an immediate release within her body. Not that I say that that'll happen. That's the only time I've ever had that happen. But what I tell people in group sessions is when it comes time to receive the energy and the frequency and the language, just envision yourself, your body as a tuning fork, and just envision that your body is this energetic tuning fork and that the language is coming to resonate that fork, tune that fork. It's like there's a vibrational toning happening within the body, and what needs to happen will happen.
Which takes me back to my experience. I remember we went to the spiritual retreat. There were like multiple sessions where you did the language of light. You and Natasha worked together. So you did the language of light and she was working in the Akashic records with each and every person present in that retreat. So when it came down to me, and I remember I was lying down on that healing bed, you guys worked on me. So she had her hand on my back and then went up to my head, and then you were reciting the language of light, and you were also like holding your hand above my back. I remember that I felt this force. I felt it physically. I felt this force literally pull out of my body. It was like there was something that was just being sucked out from the lower part of my back. And after that, when you said, okay, we're done, and I was like, I can't stand, like, I can't really, like, I feel nothing. I couldn't feel my feet at that point.
Yeah.
You were like, okay, now you can go and do the walk meditation outside in the nature. I was like, I'm unable to walk. So I just, but yeah, that was one experience. And then there was the second experience just before I left Calgary. We did that language of light session, and you were reciting the language of light, and Natasha was behind me. I remember I lost balance and she had to literally hold me. So those
that happens a lot.
Experiences that I went through with the language of light with you. And then of course, then we've had our conversations after Calgary as well. But every single time it's been a different experience altogether. Like I can't say that this experience is exactly the same as this one. Like no two experiences are the same.
Yeah, exactly. And even after working with thousands of people, I can't say there's been two the same. There isn't two the same. Even in the group classes that I do, when I do the one-on-one afterwards, like there could be 30 people, and I just go from one person to the next person to the next person. And each connection is so different. And the language can come out very different for each person, which is really interesting. It doesn't have the same tone, and so it's not a repetitive message. It's very unique, and it shifts for each person. And it's like there's a different kind of a context and vibratory rate that's coming through for each soul. I've also noticed that at times I'm very aware. So like I said, I don't know the content. It's simply, I've been told, don't try to decipher the message. The message will come through perfectly for who needs it. It's for them. You don't need to know what it is. And you couldn't know anyway, because, at times it could be like volumes of vibration and information coming through. But I do sometimes get snippets. I'll get a feeling or a sense, or something will happen, like that story with the lady. And I forget where I was going to go with that. So the group sessions, the language can come through totally different from the person I just did to this person in front of me. It takes on its own character, in a sense, maybe a soul resonance for that person. And oftentimes I'm very cognitive that there is another being that is speaking, almost like speaking the language through me, almost like that recital, except it's like a channeling, it's a flow. So it's like a specific being will bring through a message for this specific soul. I'm aware of that happening once in a while as well. So the balance thing, losing your balance, that happens a lot. I can't tell you how many times when I'm standing in front of someone and they just lose balance, and I have to put my hand and catch them. It's almost like they just want to float to the floor or something. They just kind of lose. I don't really know what that is, but It happens a lot, believe it or not.
I think you described it really well. Float to the floor, because
They just start to slowly, and it's always backwards. They just kind of slowly, yeah. And many, many times, if I didn't intercede, they'd be on their back.
No, because I remember I was so happy that Natasha was behind me, or else I would have hit the floor immediately in that session.
I really find that the language, I think this whole, that dizziness and the floating is interesting, because what the language does is actually ground you profoundly. It gets you in your body. It's almost like there's a part of the message that is like, hey, come back. You incarnated for a reason and on purpose. It's time for you to be here fully. It can be very grounding in a different way than we would normally think what grounding is.
No, because now that you said that, I remember that after each and every session of ours, I was more aware of what my current situation is, and also the surrounding. I was more aware of the surroundings around me before the session. And yeah, I completely agree. Like after the session, I do feel like I have been anchored and I have been grounded. And the clarity, like I said even earlier, there was a lot more clarity post the session with you as compared to before. I only did this once or twice. I remember I went into a session with my agenda. I was like, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to clear. Let's get to it. And after doing that a couple of times with you, after like working with you a couple of times, I just knew that I just need to be present, and whatever comes is going to come. On to the last question of our session.
Okay.
How can the knowledge and the wisdom that we have acquired and received from a session in the language of light help us navigate our healing path to a higher level?
Ultimately, light language is, as I said earlier, it's speaking to the divine in us. It's coming through the divine through me to the divine in you. And that in itself is very profound. You've been talking about it helps to bring clarity and refocus on who we are as divine beings. It helps us to bring in clarity as to what's working in our current life and what isn't, what needs to be changed. And often those things will begin to change on their own when it's known on an inner and soul level that it's time for a shift to happen. Those shifts will often just happen. I'll just take smoking as one of those. There's a gentleman in Edmonton who I did a session with who smoked. I didn't know he smoked. We spoke about a month and a half afterwards. And he said, "Oh, I forgot to tell you, David, it's like, I'm done smoking." It's like, I woke up the next morning and there was zero craving. Like it's gone, period. I didn't go through any withdrawals. It was just, I woke up and it's like I never smoked. Things like that can happen.
Yeah.
Things that are ready to be released that are no longer of service just seem to just not be there anymore in your reality. Things that are in alignment to your soul purpose and your plan will start to emerge. It really is about a realignment in our lives, within our bodies, to, kind of bring back that balance. So many of us are we're weaving in and out of balance, energetically, mentally, physically. The language of light helps to bring that back into balance and also into focus, as you were saying. When that happens, things just start to align, and it's, there's just a natural reality that starts to align with that new balance within.
Yeah, it completely resonates, because I feel that the energetic vibration after a session in the language of light is similar. Like there is a similarity after in the Akashic records. And I feel like you said, they work together, like the language of light and Akashic records work together. So the experience I have with a client in their Akashic records is somewhat a similar experience I have when we have done a session. Like I don't see it's there. And both of them are profound in their own forms, and they have always, like, be it a client session or be it my own session that I've done with Natasha, or be it my session with you in the language of light, it's just left me more calm, more peaceful, and
Hmm.
given me a lot more clarity as to what my trajectory is. Am I on the right path or am I not on the right path? What needs to stay, what needs to release? And even after I've had this clarity, it's not that I didn't do any work, but like you said, whatever is not in my highest and greatest good just automatically starts diminishing. Like
Hmm.
it just dissolves. There is,
Yeah.
I don't see that pattern come up again. Whatever is not my highest and greatest good just dissolves after our session.
Hmm.
Pretty good. It feels
Yeah.
empowering after the session.
It does. Yeah. And you know that it wasn't in your highest good because you don't even remember it. You don't need it and you don't remember it.
This was really nice, and I've just, like, I started off
Mm.
feeling stressed and nervous and anxious, and like I just had to trust that this session is going to be very interesting, like it was.
Yeah.
Thank you, David. Thank you so much for.
Yeah. Yeah. No, Gloria, I really appreciate the invitation to come on and, just the honor of working with you over the past couple of years. And it's been a while since we saw each other in person. But yeah, I really appreciate this. And I really love what you're doing with this new channel. It feels really good.
Thank you. And it's because of people like you, Natasha, Colleen, and all the healers and all the people who have genuinely assisted, helped me on my path. This is just a place for me to hold space for you guys and really honor
Mm,
that you guys have
yeah.
done for me. And hopefully, if this reaches out to other people, then it's a blessing. Like it's a domino effect, and it feels like a blessing that it's moving on. The legacy moves forward.
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing. Awesome.
Thank you so much, David.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. Please hit the like, share, and subscribe button. And for more such conscious content, please don't forget to hit the bell icon. Until next time, have a blessed week ahead. Thank you.